Periscope, join us on Welcome to Let's Talk Liberty. Periscope, join us on Facebook or YouTube to catch the live broadcast in all of its glory. All right, do we have audio? It's good. Welcome to Let's Talk Liberty. Today's going to be a fun show. This is something I've gotten quite a bit of questions about, so I just wanted to take a day and talk about it. We'll talk about what it is, how it works, and you can go to that cool intro screen, the title screen. We'll test your new title screen. Go ahead and grab your bubblies. I'm going orange bubbly tonight. It's just an orange bubbly kind of night. Oh, that's wonderful. Tonight, we are going to talk about Bitcoin. And we're going to ask the question specifically, is it too late to buy Bitcoin? Usually when you find out about an investment, you're too late. That's kind of how a lot of this stuff works. And with Bitcoin, we're going to kind of paint the picture of where we're at in its life cycle, because that'll help give us some context. We're good. Volume's good. So that intro screen is looking pretty cool. You know, it's got the stars in the background. It's getting there. Okay, but first let's start out with some funny stuff. So you'll need to go back to me full screen, and then joining me as always is my wonderfully gorgeous and stunningly attractive and intelligent production team. So let's get into it. So first, this is a picture of my man CJ learning how to wash dishes. What a ninja. So proud of you, CJ. We had jiu-jitsu practice. Oh, I should have threw up pictures from jiu-jitsu practice. That's okay. We'll do that later. And here's another one of these guys just becoming helpers. So we are big fans of the parenting model. We'll talk more about unschooling and kind of how we approach life with our kids. And of course, we'd love to hear what you guys think about it. But we're a big fan of putting your kids to work. Built-in slave labor, you know. But in all seriousness, work is such a good thing for the human soul. When I look back at my childhood and the way my parents raised me, the thing I'm most grateful about was they believed in me enough to put me to work. And in the moment, sometimes, you know, I would not want to work. I get it. You know, we all have to kind of do what we need to do. And sometimes you don't always want to do work. But looking back, it blessed me in so many ways, and it opened up so many doors for me. Now, what I find with kids, now the reason I don't think I wanted to do work is because I also went through the public school system. And so I had this kind of negative feel in my, belly when it came to work. But with our kids, what I find awesome, remarkable is, and this has been my experience with all kids, when they're little, they love work. They absolutely love it. They love when mommy and daddy believe in them and give them responsibility, and they're useful. And so we've actually, we've not been completely void of struggle. There's sometimes Sammy doesn't want to do something and we get it, and there's still there can be some resistance, but usually, to our delightful surprise, they are just excited about work and they love doing it. And anyway, that's kind of the vibe in our house. So here they are helping mom with a dish. I think that's the famous quiche. Oh my gosh, it's one of the best things you'll ever eat. Anybody who's had the quiche can testify in the comments. Uncle Judah, you know who you are. Matt, Uncle Matt. Next. So, I love this. Wow, government created this whole problem. I guess we need some more government. Seems like the right solution. Isn't it interesting though? That's basically the government's playbook. We'll make a mess and then we'll show up and be like, hey guys, we'll help out. And people don't connect the dots often, or for whatever reason, people look to government to solve problems. As a nation, if we could stop doing that, that would be amazing. The government does not solve problems. They just create more problems. The best thing the government can do is get out of our way. Let us live our lives and stop stealing from us at every intersection of human activity, and stop regulating us and telling us how we can and cannot live our lives. And just don't be a busybody. Just follow the Bible's advice. The golden rule we'd all be way better off. And I know today's a kind of crazy day for government action. I'm not going to talk too much about that today because I want to stay on topic. But if we have some time at the end, we can chat about it. Next. I love the internet, man. People are on point. I mean, this was like, this just happened today, and somebody just jumped all over it. Chip Gaines, renovating one house at a time. I mean, the guy kind of does look like Chip Gaines, but just the creativity of the internet. So proud of people. Next. You got me. I was not expecting that. Even though I might have put it in there. Oh, it's so funny every time. Gosh, so good. Forrest Gump. Oh, this is a shout out to my man Kyle. This was so funny. Me, I'm going to get up from this restaurant table without my mask on. COVID. I'll kill you. Oh gosh, Michael Scott has the best faces. All right, next. I thought this was interesting. And again, we're not going to talk a lot about this, but I do just want to it's so easy for the ministers and pastors and Christians to just be like, we condemn all violence and all, and I've heard that kind of stuff so long, but again, this is just an observation.
You have some comments.
Oh yeah? If you could help me out with those, because I can't see them. Our country, again, I'm not actually saying that I support violence. As a Christian, I do support rebellion, but I actually think, like the apostles and the martyrs, you peacefully rebel. Martin Luther King style, Rosa Parks style. I mean, you can resist and rebel without actually taking up arms and living by the sword per se. All I'm saying is it's interesting that our country, do people just forget the roots of our country, where we came from? Because we violently aggressed against the government. And that's the most celebrated thing. That's the 4th of July. That's what we're doing. That was a violent, aggressive attack against people who were the government. And that's the most celebrated moment in United States history. Again, it's just we live in an interesting country where people either completely forget our history, or and I actually like this minister, Mr. Franklin. So I'm not trying to pick on people, but I thought Jonathan has a great point. So is it always wrong? Because we'd love to hear your thoughts on the Revolutionary War, or essentially every Bible hero. If preachers thought like you in 1776, we'd still be a British colony. He just makes a good point. So Brother Jonathan's making a great point. It's actually. If you look at the Revolutionary War, ministers were taking up arms. And so C.S. Lewis has this amazing paper called Why I'm Not a Pacifist. And it's a pretty strong Christian argument for those kinds of actions in certain circumstances when great evil is rearing its head. So again, we can talk about that more in a different episode, but I thought that tweet was at least thought-provoking. Just as a Christian, don't be so quick to jump on, what seems to be the play it safe train. That'd be my advice at least. Wisdom knows when to speak and when not to speak.
Dustin Kane says, I think that's what happened today. Dude, that's hilarious. Internet is undefeated.
The internet is undefeated, Dustin Kane. My bro. Good to hear from you, man.
Cal said LOLG.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. All right, next. Okay, so let's get into our talk today. So I'm going to do a very brief history of money. Now, if you guys don't find this interesting, well, you can... Well, actually, I'm going to also share the broadcast first because I want to make sure that the people who are wanting to see this see it. So a little bit about me. I went to school for economics, which actually doesn't say a whole lot because I went to public university. So before you got excited, my degree means basically 0. Okay, I went to University of Florida. Go Gators, I suppose. I'm supposed to say that. But I don't actually think my degree means much of anything. But in my senior year of college, and they taught ridiculous economics at government, public institutions teach a horrible strain of economics, Keynesian economics, which is flat out deceptive. But in my senior year, I discovered Austrian economics through the Mises Institute. And it was an amazing experience. And I got to go to Mises University in Georgia and Auburn, Alabama. Anyway, it was amazing. It was a great experience. Got to meet some intellectual giants who really understood economics. And one of the things that fascinated me the most was the analysis of money, like what it is, where it comes from. And so I want to just do a quick little history of money, if you've never heard this. So all economies, basic economies, start with barter. I got my, what is this, fish and ham or something, right? I got my goods, you got your goods. In order for us to trade, we have to have what's called a double coincidence of wants. I have to want what you're selling, you have to want what I'm selling in the same proportions, right? And in that same way. So barter has a lot of applications. Even today you can still barter, but you run into some clear problems. Let's say I want your chicken, but you don't want my steak, or whatever, right? There's a million problems with barter because you run into this necessity for a double coincidence of wants, and you don't always have that. So what happens naturally in a market system is a third good begins to be valued as an exchange good. In other words, if I'm like, I got beef, you got chicken, this guy has something like grain, which is just like, it has a long shelf life, it's easily divisible, I can like weigh out grain, it's just easier, right? It's a good that's easier to hold on to for longer periods of time, it's not very perishable. Well, what I do is I trade my steak for grain, but I don't actually use the grain. I got the grain so I can trade you because you didn't want my steak, but you'll want the grain. Well, over time, some goods in an economy surface as an exchange good. And historically, the most famous ones are gold, silver, and copper, like precious metals. Why? Because they're scarce, right? Like iron is there's so much of it, or steel or something like that. There's so much of it that it's a bad money. They're divided into smaller units easily, right? So a diamond makes a bad money, even though it's scarce, it's precious, but it makes a bad money because if you crack one in half, you lose the value, right? But you can melt gold down, you can make bars, you can make dust, you can make nuggets, and it has a very long shelf life. It's super durable, and it's not perishable, that kind of thing. Okay, so that's where money's come from. It's just an economy starts to demand an exchange good, and that exchange good ends up being more valuable as an exchange good than its direct use. You can still use gold for earrings, and you can still use gold for fillings and wiring and all sorts of stuff, conductors and microchips. You can still use it. It's got actual use, but usually when it's used as a money, the value as a money is higher than the direct use. So people use it as a money. Okay, next. Well, eventually, this is what happens, right? So a money surfaces. So again, just an exchange good that most people honor and understand that, hey, this thing is a unit of value that we can all trade. It emerges spontaneously. There's no government making this happen, right? There's no central authority that's saying this is money. That's not how money works, right? If I try to make my money tomorrow, that's not how it works. So the money emerges spontaneously, and eventually there pops up a demand for services that help you facilitate and manage your money, okay? One of them is like a money warehouse. If you're a merchant and you have a lot of gold, it's probably not good to keep it at your house because you don't have paid security there. It's probably not good to always have it on you because eventually it's just not wise. So that you demand a trustworthy place where you can go and put your gold, and a trustworthy person who will defend your gold and give it to you when you need it. Okay, so this was the progression of how money. I'm trying to paint the picture how we got to the dollar, because it didn't just like a government just didn't come out and say, hey, here's a piece of paper and you got to use it. That's not how it ever works. It would never work like that. And when you understand where money comes from, you'll understand how people destroy money, because they're related. So now we have this gold sitting in a warehouse. Okay. What happens is when I gave my gold to, we'll call Gordon, who's the gold guy, I give my gold to Gordon. He gives me a ticket that says, hey, this is 1 ounce. Can you go to the next so this is what gold redeemable dollars used to look like, okay? So this is a $10 bill, but it's redeemable for gold. You take it to a money warehouse, you give them the ticket, and they give you the gold. That's where the value came from. It didn't just come out of thin air. Okay, it came because people valued the gold. They traded the gold. They deposited their gold at a money warehouse. They got a ticket in return. And then in society, eventually, some of the trustworthy, we'll call them banks for a second, not like the banks we have today that are in so many ways super unethical. We can talk about fractional reserve banking a bit, and just it's deception at its core. But in fact, you'll see it in this story. So I go to Gordon and I give him my gold. He gives me a ticket. Well, Gordon's dealing with a lot of people in society, and Gordon's tickets, right, there's a lot of different competing money warehouses, so there's different tickets out there in society. Mine's for 10 ounces or whatever, he has 10 ounce notes, and so I put 100 ounces inside his warehouse, and he gives me 10 of these 10 ounce notes or whatever. Okay, well, pretty soon, if I want to go buy your chickens, I could go to Gordon first and get my gold and then give you the gold. But we've the society's been operating in such a way to where you view my ticket just as good as gold. So I can skip the trip to Gordon's place and I can go straight to you with my ticket, and I'll give you my ticket because you know you can go get the gold. Okay, so this happens over some years, and then this is where the problem comes in. Well, first, before there was a central bank, there wasn't really a problem, because what would happen is the bankers would start to act unethically, but there was an actual check to keep them honest, and it's called a run on the bank. You might have heard about this. In fact, this is why the Federal Reserve said they had to exist in the first place, was to stop these runs on the bank. But the runs on the bank were the exact thing we needed to keep the bankers honest. Because this is what was happening. Gordon was noticing, hey, no one's coming to pick up my gold. They're just using the notes. So what if I lend out the gold to this other guy at interest, and no one will be the wiser, because they're not even coming to redeem their gold. Their gold's just sitting in the warehouse all the time. It's been sitting there for years. So I can just lend out some of that gold and no one would even know. This would be like if you went and put your stuff in a storage shed. Okay, this is unethical. This is illegal activity. Okay, this is embezzlement. If you went and put your stuff in a storage shed and then the guy was like, I bet he won't be back for a year. I'm just going to rent it out to somebody else without him knowing about it or use it. Or it's absolutely unethical behavior. This is fractional reserve banking. That's what it is. That's our world right now. We live in a world where it's legal to do this at the highest level, which is why our currency, one of the reasons our currency is in so much trouble. Okay, so next slide. So what happened to the dollar over time? Well, there were these structures in place that kept the bankers a little bit restricted. One of them, the clear one, was the gold standard. In fact, this is small, so I have to bounce over here to look at it on my screen. This graph is from 1913. What happened in 1913? 1914? The Federal Reserve was created. Gosh, what a horrible decision. The Creature from Jekyll Island. If you have a chance to check that book out, it'll make you want to punch somebody in a very Christian way. Just a very holy punch. And the moment the Federal Reserve was created, they instituted I believe it was a 10% ratio fractional reserve banking system, which effectively, I forget what the ratio was, but it effectively doubled the money supply. Now, when you hear about the Great Depression, you know, the explanation from the official government explanation from the Great Depression was entrepreneurs being greedy and mismanaging resources and you know, this huge bust came in. No, it was because when the money supply doubles, it causes, this is really important, and this is called the Austrian business cycle theory. Why do we have booms and busts? Why is it, like in 2008, that all of these entrepreneurs made mistakes at the same exact time? The same people that don't make mistakes for years and years and years and years, all of a sudden at the same time, all of these mistakes happen and all of these investments go bust, and we have like a huge bubble pop, and we have this recession or even depression. What is that? What's happening there? And the Keynesians, the government economics, they'll have you believe it's the market, the free market. All of these people and their greed and they get too excited about housing, so they get, you know, it's like the tulip bubble. They just buy this thing too much and too much and too much. Which again, speculation does. There's a truth there. But it doesn't explain the cluster of errors. It doesn't explain the clear systemic problem that happens in these booms and busts. But the Austrian business cycle theory does a much better job. It basically states, Jesus says, if you're going to build a tower, first count the bricks to make sure you can finish the job. Okay, so biblical wisdom says, if I'm going to build something, if I'm going to do something, first count to make sure and plan that I have the resources to do it. Okay? So, when you're an entrepreneur in a complex society, you are looking at certain bits of information to make decisions. One of the most important pieces of information is the interest rate. The interest rate is the cost of borrowing money. But that's the price of borrowing money. Okay? Just keep that in your mind for a second, the interest rate. However, money, if you go back to its beginning, money just represents real stuff. Stock capital, bricks, shovels, stuff, cattle. It just represents stuff. So when you introduce something like fractional reserve banking, effectively doubling the money supply, what it does is the money supply gets bigger. As the supply of something gets bigger, the price of each unit goes down. So that pushes the interest rate down. It tells entrepreneurs, hey, if I think my investment's going to be a positive 20% investment and I can borrow money right now at 10%, I should do it because I'll make 10%. In other words, the signal is telling me there's enough bricks, there's enough tractors, there's enough stuff in society that if I start to build my tower, I'm going to be able to finish it. It's going to be successful. However, if that number, the interest rate's been artificially lowered by something acting outside of the economy, on the economy, it's deception. In other words, all these entrepreneurs have wrong inputs at the same time, right? They're all looking at this 5% interest rate or whatever it is, and they're making decisions, but the true interest rate is like 20%. So that 10% positive investment is now actually a losing project. They shouldn't do it. It's in there. There's not enough bricks. There's not enough stuff. And that grasping for that limited amount of resources, and at the same time, it all reveals that they weren't there. That's why you have these huge busts. I hope it's a very complex thing to explain, so I hope I did a kind of good job helping you. But basically, as an entrepreneur, what you're saying is, I can make 20%, right, if I do this investment, and right now I can borrow from the bank, the cost of money is 3%. But if it wasn't really 3%, if it was artificially lowered, that deception is going to cause problems. There's going to be unintended consequences. And so that's where the Great Depression was. It was because the Federal Reserve came in and doubled the money supply effectively, and that created, it stimulated the economy, but it wasn't a good stimulation. It confused entrepreneurs. They invested in bad projects, and all of those bad projects that were unsustainable crashed at the same time. And now it's even worse than not starting the project at all because you have a 70% built tower, and those resources are actually wasted. So it would have been better not to have that stimulus in the first place because it led to a misallocation of resources and the crash. Okay, kind of complex stuff, but I'm painting a picture on why, like the incentives behind the current monetary system and why it's completely unsustainable. Like there's no way that, because at least back then in 1933, FDR made, just think about politicians for a second, like the most evil bunch imaginable. And they write history, they write themselves as the heroes of history, but they're doing stuff that's amazingly evil, like just in broad daylight. 1933. This dude says it's illegal to hold gold. Oh gosh. Oh gosh. Okay, so that happened. Zoom ahead a little bit more. 1944, Bretton Woods establishes the USD as the world's reserve currency. 1971, Nixon comes in and closes the gold window. So at least in 1971, you could still bring a note. Hey, go to the next slide for me, sweet woman. You could go and put $35 into one of the mints and get an ounce of gold until August 15, 1971. So before 1971, there was still a constraint on the ability for the Federal Reserve to ruin the currency. There was a constraint. It was called the gold standard. And it had already been kind of tinkered with and there was problems with it, but at least if you were living in 1970, you had that peace of mind that inflation would be held. It had to be, there was a check. There was actually a check. Now, again, it would have been way better to never have the Federal Reserve in the first place, but if you're going to have something like a Federal Reserve, you have to have it pegged to a real asset like gold because it keeps people honest. And what incentive do they have to print? So if you're a politician, what do you stand up and say? I'm going to give you free stuff and I'm not going to take any of your money. So what is that? In other words, I'm going to increase government spending and I'm going to decrease taxes. Well, those two things don't work. Those are in opposite forces. But people are, by and large, ignorant. And I'm not picking on anybody, but most people don't even know how politics work. That guy gives a good speech. Oh, he's got a dog that I like. He seems kind of, relatable. They don't even think about policy or how it will really affect their life. Right? The politics is one of the most cruel games because it plays on people's ignorance. You put a nice guy, I love these videos of the politicians like, I have a modestly attractive wife. People seem to like me. I'm going to say exactly what you want to hear in order for you to trust me, and then I'm not going to do anything I say. I'm sure you've seen some of those commercials of like the fake politicians, but in fact, we should look up one. That's one. Those are wonderful. Maybe later. But that's the political problem, right? The political problem is honest people don't get elected because honest people tell the truth, and the truth offends more than half. It's not going to appeal to the median voter. The median voter is looking for, they're looking for the person to say the things that are important to them in that timing. And of course, we know that primaries and general election, this changes strategies for politicians. And if you look historically, politicians don't keep their word ever. They promise a bunch of things and none of that stuff ever happens. Essentially, the public desires have very little to no effect on actual policy. It's quite remarkable. But that's what politicians do. They do stand up and they do promise, I'm gonna give you a bunch of free stuff, because that's how the world works. And I'm also not going to tax you. Taxing is not politically popular, okay? Raising taxes. Unless nowadays you say raise taxes on the rich and then everybody gets excited because it's somehow moral to steal people's money if they have a lot of it. So that's where we're at now. But Nixon had to do this because it let the third option fully come into play, which is just print money so that the people don't feel you taxing them, but you're still able to throw some money at the special interests and the people that you made campaign promises to. You're still able to throw some money that way with the printed dollars. It's called taxation without representation because we're all losing. Every dollar that we're holding is getting less valuable, and no one ever voted on it. So go back to that graph, the last slide of the dollar. So this is the dollar until 2013. And a lot has happened since 2013. So just hold on to your horses because it's going to get bumpy. And I'm not a negative person. I look at when Joseph saw 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine, he did not take a defeatist mindset. He just used wisdom to position himself in a place where he would prosper through it. And God will give you the power to create wealth. So I am not here to like doomsday you and make you, I hope that's not what happens. If I have so far, I'm sorry. My goal today is just to help you have wisdom that if you're in the dollar, you're on the Titanic. And that's okay. There's tons of other options. And we're going to talk about one of them today, Bitcoin and some other cryptocurrencies. There's tons of other options. You don't have to stay on the Titanic. There's tons of options. The freedom will win. The parasitical class that lives off stealing from others, they're going to crash and burn every time. They always do. And God's kingdom will manifest on earth. And part of that is freedom. Political, economic, total freedom for the human creature. But this graph shows you the collapse of the dollar over time, where in 2013, a dollar from 1913 was worth 5 cents. Yikes. In 2013, 95% of the value wiped away like that. Okay, that's a starting place. Now, since 2013, have things gotten better for the dollar? No, let's go to slide 15. So 2 slides forward. This graph, and it's kind of hard to see because my video almost covers it up. Actually, it doesn't cover it up. It's just all happened so fast. This is the monetary stock, and 23.6% of all US dollars ever created were created in 2020. So you can see that parabolic line at the end of the graph. And again, if you remember the Great Depression, 1913, the money supply doubled. It wasn't until the late 20s where the impact, where the party was over. You can kick the can down the road, but eventually the party's over, right? So it does take some time. It's not like immediate, like tomorrow the dollar's gonna crash. Now, if we hit hyperinflation, and there's a few things that would lead to that, then you have a real crisis on your hands. You have a real problem. And of course, if if you're a student of history, which I suggest you know a little bit at least, right? Like know what happened to the Deutschmark, know what happened to Germany's currency when they experienced hyperinflation, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, right? It ruins people's wealth, right? And if you look at World War I and then what happened after that, and then World War II, for the German people, I would say the number one factor that led to them looking to Hitler as a savior was what happened to their currency. You had a generation of Germans experience a complete destruction of all their savings, and that led to panic and fear and anxiety. And guess who Hitler blamed? The banks, or at least the Jewish. It was the government policies ruining the currency, but they were a scapegoat. The Jews were a scapegoat. And it was easy to point to them and say, it was them. And it's really not a laughing matter. You know the history, it's horrible. But when people, like the German people are good people. How does a whole nation of really good people let something like that happen? Well, when you've saved for 60 years and you're going into retirement and all of a sudden that's all wiped out like that. Read stories about German hyperinflation. It's like overnight, people were working and they were going at lunch to try to trade all their wealth for just bread or anything they could get, and then they go back to work again. It was an absolute panic. I heard stories where they'd have wheelbarrows of notes and they dumped the paper out because the wheelbarrow was more valuable. So hyperinflation is something, if that happens, hold on to your butts. It's going to get wild. And that's the kind of event that would usher in the Antichrist. I think the church will be gone by then, but I'm just saying that's the kind of event that would absolutely create the way for people to be scared and freaked out enough to actually turn to a Hitler, to turn to an Antichrist figure that's going to save the world and promise peace and take away all their freedom and enslave them under a central bank managed cryptocurrency. I know, we're still getting to Bitcoin. Here we go. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this one. This is fun. This is fun for me. Oh, sorry. Can you move? That's the price of Bitcoin. If you go to the power, here, I'll go to the slide. Go to me full screen for just a second. And then you can go back to that one. And, okay, so let's jump into Bitcoin. So what is Bitcoin and why is it it's a free market solution, right? So where did Bitcoin come from, first of all? Like, what was the purpose, right? The cryptographers that created Bitcoin were clear that it was in response to the wicked behavior from the central banks, the greed and the lust for power with the bankers. This was in response because they were ruining the money in order to line their pockets and their constituents' pockets, and they were robbing people blind. And who gets hurt the worst when the Federal Reserve prints trillions of dollars? Poor people. Usually people that have a fixed income, because your fixed income this month buys this many goods, and all of a sudden they printed trillions of dollars, and now your fixed income next month just buys less, and your fixed income the next month buys less. So poor people on fixed incomes get ruined during these quantitative easing sessions, these stimulus packages. It ruins poor people. So if you think, oh, we need more stimulus to help the poor, you are deceived. You're in direct opposition to healthy economics. You're missing the point. It is ruining stimulus money. People that are like, oh, I wish they'd give $2,000 instead of $600. You just don't understand economics. And I'm not here to be mean to you. Just learn so that you won't fall into that wrong believing. It's not just like there's no unintended consequences to actions like that. You can't just print money and nothing bad happens. That's not how it works. There is an unintended consequence, and it makes this ultra wealthy. The first people that get those new dollars can buy goods before the prices have gone up. The last people to get those new dollars buy goods after the prices have gone up. And of course, historically, when money's printed like that, like in 2020, the wealthy, if you look at how Bezos did last year, he did really good. The ultra wealthy get way wealthier because they're well connected. They have the banks on their speed dial, and so they're the ones that typically get that freshly printed money first, and they're able to capitalize on it. And it's just playing a game with a total stacked deck against the poorest of an economy. And the middle class, of course, bears the brunt of the actual cost and gets crushed in the process too. So Bitcoin was created as a stick it to the man thing. It was like, look, we're going to release something that no one can manage, no one can shut it down. If it, first of all, there's nothing that guarantees Bitcoin's value. I'll just say that, right? You should know that. There's nothing what makes something valuable. In fact, let's get into that. Before we do this slide, let's go to, where did I thought I put a person digging a hole. No, I didn't. Okay. I'll just talk about this for a second. You can go to full screen if you want. So there's a guy named Karl Marx, if you haven't heard of him, German philosopher who has terrible economics. And he believed that value came from labor. And it got him into all sorts of problems. But it's actually a very dumb view of life. It takes a very small amount of rebuttal power to just shoot that thing down. So if value came from labor, then I could just walk in a circle for hours and hours and hours, and somebody's supposed to give me value. I mean, I'm doing work. I'm walking in a circle. I can go in my backyard and dig a hole and then bury it, and then dig a hole and then bury it. If my labor produced value just by nature of labor, well then it's just an absurd world. I don't know how Marx ever got famous, besides governments really liked to use, again, it's almost like it helped them create class warfare, and that was really favorable for politics. For politics to do really well, you need an us versus them. You need to have this, it's that professional wrestling thing. If you can get the peasants and the peons all fighting each other, then you can sit back and steal from all of them. So I think the reason the state embraced Marxism was because it created class warfare. It created this, hey, the workers are being exploited by the entrepreneurs. Couldn't be farther from the truth, by the way. If you're a worker, think about if you have a job, are you mad at your boss for giving you a job? No, it's like that person provided you a way to earn income. It's like absolutely backwards, this idea that they're exploiting you. No, they created an opportunity for you. Now there could be bad situations out there. And again, just case by case basis, right? If there is exploitation somewhere, there could be wrongdoing. I'm not saying everything, every situation is necessarily good. I'm just saying the entrepreneur plays a critical role. They take risk, they put up capital, they spend a bunch of their time, they work 90 hours a week in order to avoid working 40, just to create jobs for others and to create a better life for themselves. But it's a win-win. They create many, many win-wins. And my experience when I meet, people that I've worked with and worked for, all I am is grateful that they took that time and that risk to create the opportunity. Anyway, small side tangent, but Marx, I think the reason he was so embraced, because it's such a dumb philosophy, but I think it was embraced because it would create this class warfare. The laborers would start to feel like, it was easy to get people emotional and then get them in the voting booth in a certain way. So, but value doesn't come from labor, right? I hope we can establish that. If I go dig a hole in my backyard and then fill it back up and then dig a hole and do that 1,000 times, I haven't created any value, right? So where does value come from? Well, it's subjective. It comes from the subjective preferences of people. My dad used to always say growing up, I would say I had basketball card collections, and I'd be like, oh, this Michael Jordan card, it's worth $600. And he'd say, well, it's worth whatever somebody will pay for it. Yes, your little book says it's worth $600, and that's fine because that book came from like supply and demand and many, many interactions over time. But ultimately, the way you really know what it's worth is when you go to a show or an expo or a flea market and you hand it to somebody and they trade their valuable thing to you, right? That's when a price is determined in the actual transaction. So it comes from subjective preference. So if you could imagine a world right now, and of course this is supply and demand, where the more supply of something, the less valuable, all else equal, per unit that thing is. If you could imagine a world, we lived on an island and there was just fish everywhere, well then fish would be relatively inexpensive, right? But if there was just like a few fish, those fish are more valuable, right? Supply and demand. Now if you live in that same island and nobody likes fish, it doesn't matter how many fish there are. If the demand is 0, they're not valuable. You could have 1 million people and all of them just hate fish. It's a society that just doesn't like the taste of fish. And you can have a bunch of fish or a little amount of fish, doesn't matter. The price of fish is 0. Why? Because there's also demand. What people are willing to pay for it. Right? So those two things create price. So Bitcoin, if people didn't want Bitcoin, it would be worthless. Because value is determined by supply, but also demand. So, okay, Bitcoin has a limited fixed supply, and it's written in the code. No one can change it. No one's managing it. Not a single person. There's not a chairman of the board saying, I think we'll do more Bitcoin this year. And that's not how it works. It was written as a software program, open source. Anybody can see it, released onto the internet once and for all, can't be tinkered with. And there's certain rules within the protocol that are fixed. It's wonderful. Now, as people started to value that's where the demand started to build for it. Met with a fixed supply, that's why the price is rising. Now, my question to you, do you think people are going to want Bitcoin in the future? That's the big question. So, and I would answer that. Let's look at Bitcoin's price. This is slide number 16. 16, the graph. Let's take a look at Bitcoin's price. And right now it's on a bull run, which means it's going crazy. There's a lot of media behind it. There's a lot of hype. And usually when you're talking to your if you were talking to a day trader or somebody who does, stocks for a living, they would say you're supposed to buy on the lows. Well, first you're supposed to study the fundamentals and to see if the company has a desirable offering. Like, do they have a value proposition that is actually desirable, right? Because some people think that Bitcoin is just speculation and that it doesn't really have any fundamentals. It doesn't really produce anything, which they're wrong. For sure they're wrong. And that still doesn't really matter about the price of something. The price is still just determined by if people want it, which I hope you can agree with me on that, because clearly that's what happened with Bitcoin. But most people will say, hey, you're supposed to buy on the lows and then sell on the highs. And I typically agree. Now, what I would encourage you to do is just begin to start buying Bitcoin little by little. Trade your dollars for stuff quickly, because the dollar is a nightmare and it's not going to get better for the dollar. Again, 2020 was not a good year for the dollar, and it will take some time until the dollar experiences the consequences of the actions that the Federal Reserve took in 2020. But what I would suggest is, instead of trying to guess the lows and the highs of Bitcoin, is I would convert 10% at least. Investment advice, I'm not I have to make a disclaimer here, right? I'm not a certified investment consultant or something. But the general theory is, if you're early on in your earnings, you can take more risk. And if you're closer to retirement, you take less risk, right? That's how people typically look at these decisions, and there's wisdom there, that's fine. I'm not bad-mouthing that. But I am saying, what could be riskier than holding the dollar? Really, think about it. What could be riskier than holding the dollar? Are they going to stop printing? No. They've showed their hand for the last 20, 40 years now, 50 years now, since 1971, right? 50 years, they've showed that when a president comes in, he cares about one thing: getting reelected in 4 years. They don't really care what's going to happen in 20 years. And then the decisions they make now, that's what's affecting 20 years from now. So they make terrible decisions because they're not going to be the one cleaning up the mess. They're going to live in a time where the decisions they make now won't really affect their time slot. So of course they plan, they kick that can way down the road and let somebody else deal with it. And that's why our national debt is where it's at. And that's why our monetary base is where it's at. And the dollar situation is where it's at. So what I would say is, I've personally adopted a different kind of mindset about Bitcoin. I'm not trying to, I don't want Bitcoin to be a certain amount of dollars. I'm actually living in a world in my mind where the dollar is totally meaningless, because I see it coming like as clear as day. I see the 7 years of plenty, and then I see the 7 years of famine, right, for the dollar. And I've already made the transition in my mind that, like, there's going to be a time soon where the people don't measure stuff in value of dollars because it's completely lost its relevance. So our family's more just like, let's get to 10 Bitcoins or 20 Bitcoins, because there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoins ever made. It's a fixed supply. Go to that next slide for me if you don't mind. We'll just springboard on this one. So there's total supply of Bitcoin, 21 million Bitcoin. It's fixed. No one can change it, okay? Now, of course, you don't have to buy one Bitcoin, because one Bitcoin right now, I think today it's almost at 40 grand a Bitcoin. Last I checked, at least, it was rapidly rising past 37, 38, so not sure where we're at right now, but it's on the up and up. 37,500 right now for a Bitcoin. So you can buy $100 worth of Bitcoin. You don't have to buy 30. You don't have to buy a one Bitcoin. It's just like a stock. You can buy portions of a stock. You don't have to buy a single unit. There's plenty of places, and I'll show you some resources. And of course, you can always message me too. I'll walk you through it. We help people buy Bitcoin all the time, because some people are uncomfortable with the technology, but it does have a long way to go on the user experience. In fact, I find that really encouraging, because it's so not user friendly today, and still people want it. So imagine when it's really easy to buy and sell and trade Bitcoin, which it has gotten a lot better. We've seen since the 2017 bull run, which led that speculative boom led to a lot of investment. Speculation's good because a bunch of resources come into the space and it attracts talent. And then that talent gets committed. They change their career. They were going to be a C++ developer. Now they're a blockchain developer. Okay, so you have more people in the space building and creating the infrastructure for long-term success. Just like the internet. You know, when the internet boom happened, it wasn't that the internet was a bad idea when the bubble popped in 99. You know, it was like, oh, the internet's over. No, that speculation brought a ton of people that were going to be, you know, animators and farmers and doctors. Now they're going to be website developers and, you know, JavaScript writers. And so you brought a lot of talent into the space that helped build the infrastructure. Well, the same thing is happening in blockchain. Now most businesses have most big businesses are working with some blockchain developer on some level, whether it's supply chain management, decentralized finance. There's tons of applications for the blockchain world. We'll talk about a few of them. But today we're going to really focus on Bitcoin because Bitcoin is the winner because of marketing. And I want you to get this. It's not the best technology. It's not the most efficient cryptocurrency. It doesn't have the best protocols for how they reach consensus or lowest fees for transacting. There's tons of technologies that are better than Bitcoin, that are actually more built for, you know, tiny microtransactions in the third world. And you know, yeah, I agree with all that. There's tons of technologies that are better than Bitcoin. But nobody's got the brand of Bitcoin. And again, value comes from the subjective preferences of people. And so people, if you ask them about cryptocurrency, you know, if you ask 100 people, 80 of them are going to say, yeah, I know, I've heard Bitcoin. And like maybe 10 of them are going to say, yeah, I've heard of Ethereum. Okay, so that's number one and number two. So Bitcoin still is winning in a massive way that way. So and then after the year 2140, there'll be no more mined Bitcoin. I just want to throw this point out. So the way it works right now is I trade with you Bitcoin. I send my Bitcoin directly to you. Some anonymous computer on the network that doesn't know either of us is solving mathematical equations using their GPU. So it's not even a human doing it. It's just a software program doing it. It's very safe to transact, and it solves the problem of double spending. The double spending problem is a real problem with online payments, and Bitcoin successfully did that. The protocols successfully solved that problem, and this is through validating and reaching consensus. Like all Bitcoin is a shared ledger. It's like a spreadsheet that says Lucas has 5 and you have 4, and then if I trade 2 to you, then you went up to 6 and I went down to 3. That's all Bitcoin is. And then they have the units, which are called Bitcoin, but the ledger, the shared ledger, it's just an agreed upon unit of value that we exchange for the purpose of exchange. And that the whole network can see and monitor. It's transparent, it's open source, it's completely decentralized, there's no central management of it, right? And so that's all it is. Now, if I want to trade my 1 Bitcoin to you, or my 0.0001 Bitcoin to you, someone has to validate that transaction, and it's anonymous. I mean, the people don't know who we are. It's relatively anonymous. Like I will answer the question, can the government take your Bitcoin? I'll answer that question in a second, because they took your gold, or they tried to. Now think about in 1933 when he tried to steal all your gold, making it illegal. Do you think they took everybody's gold? No. Government came and said, hey, you have 30 ounces here. No, I don't. I lost it. Fell off the boat. Sorry, bro. How are they going to, it's impossible to track your Bitcoin. It's impossible. It's like your guns. When they come to take your guns, are you going to be like, oh yeah, here they are? No, I lost them. Boating accident. All gone. All of them. Same time. Yeah, freak accident. Imagine that. By the way, it is not immoral to lie when you're under physical threat of violence and duress. If somebody comes to your house and says, so all the Christians out there saying, you shouldn't lie. You shouldn't be dishonest, Lucas. If somebody comes to your house and says, I'm planning on murdering your family, where are they? They're not here. They're not here. That's the Christian thing to say. Where are the Jews? Where have you hidden them? I didn't. They're not here. Not here. So don't get all high and mighty on me. The aggressor, the violent aggressor, known as the government, is not a good guy and not acting morally. And in times of war like that, it's the moral thing to say, no Jews here. Sorry, keep going. Check the next house. And if you're confused about that, we're just going to disagree. and that's okay. But yeah, if they come and say, where's your Bitcoin? I don't know, bro. I'm not sure. And there's zero conflict in my conscience, and there should be zero conflict in yours. Because again, the aggressor who's threatening you with violence against your will is not standing in the right, they're not legitimate authority in the eyes of God. Never have been, never will be. So, okay, so small tangent, but long story short, yeah, even if they tried to track Bitcoin purchases and the IRS tried to audit the ledger or something, and you know, first of all, they would never even be able to do it. They're not smart enough to figure it out. But if they did, and they came and they said, hey, I saw, you know, you bought from this exchange, you bought, you know, $1 million worth of Bitcoin, where is it? Did you pay taxes on what happened to it? You could have honestly put it on a cold storage, you know, like a USB, you know, hard wallet, right? You could have put it on a device like that and lost it. Happens all the time. Happens all the time, right? So hopefully you understand. They can't actually trace Bitcoin. It's decentralized. It's awesome. So why do we believe Bitcoin is going to be an amazing tool to help people experience freedom from tyrannical, wicked people? Well, it's because the Bible describes the end of the world using an electronic currency. Now we know that's not Bitcoin. For the record, it's not Bitcoin. It'll be a cryptocurrency that is issued through the Antichrist, through the New World Order, and you have to use it by force, and you're not able to buy and sell without it, right? We see all that coming clearly. But because they're using a cryptocurrency, it tells me that the cryptocurrency industry is going to do well until then, because it has become a solution in so many ways, and the government always just copies what the free market's doing to create their wicked version of it. So that's why in 2013, when Sonny and I decided to invest, we did it biblically. We saw in the Bible is hit. Remember, when you see prophecy in the Bible, it's history written before it's happened. And you can take it to the bank every single time. So when we saw Bitcoin and we understood Revelation and we understood what was happening at the end of the world, they're not buying and selling with gold. And if you like gold, that's fine. I'm not anti-gold. It'll hold its value. It'll do better than the dollar, that's for sure. But in the book of Revelation, they're using electronic currency. So that's why we invested back in 2013, is because, yep, got a question.
What are your thoughts about Litecoin and Dogecoin?
Good question. So Litecoin, Dogecoin. There's a bunch of altcoins. I think they all offer really cool things. Like Litecoin's whole value proposition is just a much more efficient version. It's like the silver to the Bitcoin gold. Hey, and silver does well. So there's a lot of winners in the space. You know, Dogecoin, I believe, was like created as a joke, and then it took off, and you know, there's a whole movement around it, almost like just to be funny, but it's doing well. You know, and then there's some like Monero, which are like really hard to trace, super secure, and there's a lot of cool technologies. We invest in about 15 cryptocurrencies, and I'm happy to share the ones we invest in that we just think are cool. That might be a different episode because we're almost at 10 right now. But yeah, there's a lot of really good ones. And then you'll notice during the bull runs, a bunch of scammy ones will pop up, and just what I would suggest is find someone you trust who knows the space really well, and then kind of follow their lead. You know, that's how we do it. We find a few people that really know what they're talking about. I'm more of a marketing guy, an economics guy. I don't understand the technology that well. I understand it enough to understand that the problems it solves and to feel comfortable putting my dollars there. But people think like you have to understand it before you invest in it. No, you don't. Most people don't know how Amazon works and they invest in it, or most people didn't know how the internet works. They still don't know how the internet works, but you can still use it and invest in it. You just need to understand what problems it solves, and if all the nerds are getting real excited about it, probably a good thing, right? So when I saw all the nerds getting really excited about cryptocurrencies, I didn't have to figure them out to have that confidence. They figured them out and they were excited about it, and I trust those guys. So that's kind of how I approached it, and it's done us very well. Okay, I want to wrap it up a bit. So let's go to, it's 10 o'clock now. Any other questions? don't want to ignore any questions.
Yes. You have another question. What do you try to get a Bitcoin? If it's money, where does that money go?
Perfect question. So,
That's
that was Scott. Okay, so I'm gonna switch over to a few screens here to show some technologies, some platforms we use personally. And if you go to our website, letstalklibertytoday.com, there's a button that says Buy Bitcoin. And if you hit that button, it'll take you to Coinbase. You can just enter in your information, sign up. When you purchase at least $100 worth, you'll get $10 and I'll get $10 for being the referral. So that helps our show and we appreciate it. Once you have Bitcoin, there's a place you can store it and earn interest on it. And we earn 6.5% APR on our Bitcoin right now. So, in just a few months, with just $20,000, $30,000, you're earning hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars of interest in Bitcoin. So it's growing at the rate, and you can take it out anytime you want to. It's not like fixed in like a CD for 2 years or something. You can take it out tomorrow if you want to. And that's the world of decentralized finance, which I'd love to cover someday because it solves so many problems that the big banks don't solve. So cryptocurrencies they're a tool to really help people, to really help especially developing nations and people who do have low income. But my big recommendation, I know we got to wind it up, is if you have dollars right now, don't keep them sat in dollars. Buy assets. And if you are going to have some amount that's just sitting, buy cryptocurrency. The number one thing you do is buy assets, land, tools, things that you can use to create wealth and to help people to solve problems, right? Creating wealth is just another way of saying solving problems for people. So you don't have to make it all about money or something. It's about helping people, right? If you're a good entrepreneur in the free market, it means that you've helped a lot of people. If we need to use more Christian-y language so we don't, sound wicked. There's this idea that like if you make a lot of money, you're somehow not Christian. The truth is in the free market, it's because you've helped a lot of people. You've served a lot of people. You've provided solutions for a lot of people. And that's a really godly and good thing. It's a really Christian thing to do, to get out there and serve other people, to become the least and to put other people's needs ahead of yours. And then God's way of rewarding you through the marketplace is sales and increase.
Just curious, I drew $100 at Dodge yesterday.
Oh, cool, yeah. And they're fun, man. We have fun with it. I love that, Dustin. And watch how it goes, man. I mean, what I will say too is like, again, take a long approach. Like, will they crash again? Probably. The political climate is kind of crazy right now. If the next big move that I see is a government saying that they're illegal, because of course it threatens, when everybody moves out of the dollar to Bitcoin, then the show's over, the game's over for the politicians, right? So the politicians will obviously try to make it illegal. That's the next big move. And when that happens, a lot of do-gooder Christians that lack wisdom, they're innocent as doves, but they're not very wise, they'll feel like, oh, it's illegal, Romans 13, just got to give it all away to the wicked, evil people. And it could, just like those do-gooder Christians that are innocent as doves and not as wise as serpents, they'll also be super conflicted when they take the guns, when they come after guns, right? They're going to be the same people like, Romans 13, I'm not sure what to do here. And a lot of them are going to line up and give away their guns. And, that's another issue, I guess. We don't personally own guns. I'm not against them. I think they're really cool. But we don't actually own any. But I do see that being the next attack of the state when they're losing their power. If you take away the money from the state, you take away all of its power. Its ability to go to endless wars, to nation build, to manage, do all of its exploits. If you take away the money, you take away all of its power, right? So it will inevitably happen. I'm not a prophet or anything. I can prophesy, I suppose. But this isn't like a prophecy. This is just obvious. This is like the writings on the wall. They will try to make Bitcoin illegal, and people will have a choice. Do we recognize that institution of greedy, wicked, and corrupt and demonic forces as like a legitimate authority? And do we show them where the Germans are? Do we show the Germans where the Jews are? Hey, they're right in here. Glad you asked. Check the basement. Or do we recognize that's actually evil? They're operating, they're breaking the golden rule, they're initiating violence, they're ruining the poor. You're supposed to, as a Christian, stand up for the cause of the poor. You're supposed to stand up for the least of these. The government's slaughtering babies. How are you even confused about what side of the aisle they're on? Like, really? Don't, when Molech, and Baal worshipers are pushing you, and you stand against wickedness. That's what the heroes of the Bible did. So we have to embrace the wise as a serpent part of that verse. We have to get past this ridiculous version of Christianity that says, since they're called government, they must be good. Because my translation of Romans 13 says the word government, and they call themselves government. So therefore, they must be the people I'm supposed to obey, without even using this guy and thinking about what you're saying. Okay, ran over. Bitcoin's awesome. We will do more episodes on this. If you have questions about it, please let us know. Go to slide number 19, if you don't mind, sweet, beautiful lady. This is, I just want to show you some branding from this. This is Coinbase. It's the largest in the United States, at least, exchange. So you'll go to Coinbase through that referral link on our site. If you go to our site, please do it that way because it helps us. And I'm upfront about that. I'm asking you to give us $10 worth of Bitcoin, and then you get $10 worth of Bitcoin. And and that's one way that Coinbase has been creative in rewarding people for spreading the word. Did it say get $5 in free Bitcoin? See, you'll get $10 through my link. So use my link, you'll get even more. Okay. What you'll do is you'll sign up, they'll walk you through username, password, all this stuff. Once you buy your Bitcoin on Coinbase, you can transfer it to a wallet, and there's a lot of wallets. There's free wallets. I use something called Atomic Wallet, but you can use open source, free. I mean, there's tons of free ones. You can buy an actual physical wallet, like a Nano Ledger or something that you can plug into your computer, put your Bitcoin on and carry it around in your hand. You can put it in a safety deposit box. You can hide it in your backyard. You have a lot of options, and anytime you're ready to plug it in somewhere, you can access it. Okay, so you can do cold storage like that, hard storage like a hard wallet, or you can do a soft wallet like something on your computer or your phone. There's tons of apps on your phone. We have, again, Atomic Wallet on the phone. It's very easy. What you'll do is you'll buy it on the exchange. You'll transfer it off the exchange to a wallet. Now go to slide 18, or you can do what we do with a large portion of our cryptos, and that we go and put a lot of them in BlockFi. BlockFi is a decentralized finance platform that automatically invests, and it's 100%, there is risk involved, but it's low risk. You're not just loaning out your Bitcoin. Somebody's using their cryptocurrency as collateral, and they're borrowing against it. That's their business model, and they're paying interest. But they do have their cryptocurrency tied up as collateral. So if they don't pay their notes, they have that collateral there that can be taken. So it's a very low risk, but there is risk. But you put your Bitcoin to work for you. And if you're just going to adopt like a $200 a month, I'm just going to put in Bitcoin. If you're just going to adopt a strategy like that, which I think would be a good strategy, again, like what I would say is whatever you were planning on saving, just don't save it in US dollars, right? You can always convert Bitcoin to US dollars if you need it. But at least if you save it in Bitcoin, it won't get destroyed by the increased supply of dollars, right? If you hold dollars, the dollar is just going to get less valuable. So at least put it in something like Bitcoin that will hold its value or increase over time. Why will it increase over time? Because the demand for Bitcoin is just starting. Get this, okay? I know we're running a little late. I'm going to have 5 more minutes. We're out of here. The demand for Bitcoin is just starting, okay? Most of the capital hasn't touched Bitcoin. They didn't understand it. They thought it was weird. A few, the nerds, they got into it, but the investors didn't touch it. In 2017, some of them started to, but most of that bull run was fueled by individuals like us figuring out that maybe it was actually worth something. There was some good marketing around Bitcoin, and demand started to build for it. But now, you know what this current bull run is being fueled by are huge companies saying, hey, we have billions of dollars on our balance sheet and we see what you're doing to the dollar. We're not going to do it. We're going to change 10% of our balance sheet to Bitcoin. So Microsystems bought like hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. And there's a huge supply crunch right now because the buyers of Bitcoin are what we call whales. They're these huge buyers that are bringing in tons of capital, and they're not able to fulfill the purchases because there's a fixed supply. And let me also just mention this. Bitcoin was really confused. You think it's confusing now. It's 11 years old or 12 years old now. When it first came out, nobody knew what was going on with it. And I bet you 5 to 10 million Bitcoins are lost forever. So the actual supply of Bitcoins is much less. Is much less than 21 million. I bet you there's at least half of the Bitcoin just lost forever because people mismanaged it, lost their private keys. They died and it was on a laptop. They dropped it. So you're talking a very small supply, and it's not it's increasing tiny by tiny bit until 2140, and after 2140, there's no more Bitcoin. Just got a price alert from Bitcoin. It's at 37,422. Wow, it's just crushing it. So that BlockFi is another one of those. So if you're on our website, there's a second button that says earn interest on your Bitcoin. So once you go to Coinbase and buy your Bitcoin, it'll take a little bit. You'll have it in your account. 10 minutes, you'll have Bitcoin in your account. Then you go to BlockFi, create an account, and you'll transfer from your Coinbase to your BlockFi. You'll use withdrawal from Coinbase, and you'll enter in your wallet address from BlockFi and hit deposit on BlockFi. And then you'll transfer from Coinbase to BlockFi, and then it'll sit there and start earning interest. Just automatically, every month you get paid. You'll see it racking up immediately. It's pretty cool. And if you need help with this stuff, I'm happy to help you. So again, we want to help people transition because this is where things are headed. You think that like our generation was reluctant. The millennials aren't reluctant at all. They're already on board with this. This is the future of money, right? So, and of course we know the end time ecosystem is digital currency. And again, anyway, we'll end it there. So Sonia's super excited about all the Bitcoin talk. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. If you have questions, please let us know. I thought it would be hard to fill an hour with talking about Bitcoin, but I have so much left to talk about. So we'll have to do another episode because I didn't get into a lot of like the altcoins. There's tons of cool altcoins that do different things. So we are going to have to just schedule another episode for cryptos. But hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully it helped you a bit. And hopefully you'll make the step and join the revolution because you won't regret it. And in terms of knowing when to buy, just have a long-term approach. It's just getting started. Cryptos are just getting started. Think about the 5-year, 10-year vision, and don't be in a hurry. And you'll do well if you don't sell when it starts to crash. That's the worst thing you can do. Just relax and hold on to it because it's going to go back up. So bless you. Oh, I didn't fix this screen. I'll have to do that. Anyway, if you feel led to give to Let's Talk Liberty, there's some ways you can do that. I covered up my email here in my, oh, there we go. She can do it. Look at that. You can grab a corner and make me really small, maybe. Yeah, there we go. Thank you, beautiful lady. If you have questions, let's talk liberty today at gmail.com or let's talk libertytoday.com. Again, if you're wanting to buy Bitcoin, use our link. It'll help us. And we will see you tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Central Time for another episode of Let's Talk